How about if I just start at the beginning? You could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with this. And that's what the I Am Real World's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Well, welcome everyone to Chasing Giants, brought to you by buyafarm.com. This is episode 50 on Super Bowl Sunday. Don Higgins, how are we doing tonight?
Good. How are you, Terry?
Good. It's hard to believe it's episode 50. Last year on Super Bowl Sunday, we were recording and kind of laughing that we really didn't care what was going on the TV. I think I feel the same way tonight.
That hasn't changed a bit for me either.
Yeah. I'm really excited about tonight's episode. We've been kind of pumping this up a little bit tonight. As time has gone on, there's been several people that are kind of in my circle of friends that I've become very close to and respect very well, and we have one of those people as a guest tonight, Duane Hopkins, the man with all of the plans as it comes to food plot seed. There's not a better guy that I think we could have on this episode tonight to help us answer some of these food plot questions.
I agree 100%. Duane was there from the very beginning of Real World. I remember walking into his office being nervous as can be with the idea of starting a new seed company. And Duane was the one at Kitchen Seed that I shared that idea with. And the rest is history, you could say.
So welcome, Duane. How are you tonight?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me on tonight.
I hope you're not too upset you're missing the Super Bowl to talk with deer hunting with us.
No, it'll be in the news tomorrow. That's good enough for me.
Well, before we get rocking and rolling, I want to hear this a little bit, Duane. So Don says he was nervous coming in and pitching this idea to you. What was it like when Don came in and first started talking about his dreams of making a food plot seed because he didn't like anything that was on the market? What was that experience like for you?
Well, it was a little humbling because I knew who Don was from that first 200-inch deer that he killed, and I might have been a little nervous myself having somebody of that caliber sitting in my office with me. But he had a food plot line we were currently selling at the time and wasn't doing anything special with it. And so it's as much as it was a dream come true for them, it was for Kitchen Seed and myself as well.
Well, could you have imagined that first conversation it seems like it's been a long time ago, but as far as businesses go, it hasn't really been that long. Did you imagine it would have turned into what it is now?
You know, it's there from the first day, his goal and ambition was to be the best food plot company out there, the biggest and the best. And that's everybody wants to be that person or that company, but this company's actually it's grown every year since we started it. So
off to a crazy start this year. We can all say that, right, Don?
For sure.
Yeah. So tonight's episode, we're going to focus a lot on spring food plot, and it's our goal. I want to be full disclosure with everybody that's listening tonight. It is our goal in this episode not to just be a real world commercial, but to provide tools and ideas on different products and answer questions that people have submitted in. But it doesn't mean we won't use the real world stuff as an analogy, because that's what we know the best. So bear with us as that, but we promise you this isn't just an hour-long conversation on it. But before we kick off on it, I think, Don, tell us a little bit about where consulting's taking you. I've seen some pretty cool Instagram posts that you've made this week.
Yeah, I started the week here in Illinois and did 3 properties in Illinois. And then I went to Missouri and Iowa. Got home from Iowa last night and once again, I just met a bunch of fantastic people. I wouldn't trade what I do for anything.
So what's the, I think bitter cold is coming into my area here in Kentucky this week. What's coming in for you guys up there in Illinois?
Same thing.
Okay.
It's going to get really cold, and I'm glad that I've got the real world soybeans and the Nutri-Crave corn for my deer, because they're going to be into it this week.
Yeah. So Duane, tell us real quick, what's this time of year like for you aside from the real world side? As I'm guessing that most farmers that you're dealing with, I mean, you're most of your job is dealing with row crop farmers. I'm assuming that they're doing final preps, getting ready for planting season, and making sure all's copacetic for what their plans are this year, right?
Yeah, that's our customer base is pretty much ordered up, and again, the plan's been put into place for 2021 row crops. Our job to have it ready to go and on the farm by April 1st. So where most people think we don't do much in the wintertime, January to June is a pretty hard run at our place.
Right. All right. We're going to take a segment in the middle of the episode on the series, Lessons Learned from a Research Herd, but before we move into that, we were trying to figure out the best way to kind of navigate through some of the spring food plot products and provide some feedback. I want to give a disclosure that says there's going to be people that take exception to probably some things we say. They might use it a different way. So we're talking from the perspective of average food plotters to serious land managers. Talking about different products, what it gives deer, what the advantages, disadvantages are, and maybe even some insight on things you need to watch for when you plant them. So I have a list of different products here that I want to pick Duane's brain with, and I didn't know how to organize them, so they're just in alphabetical order. And we're going to start with alfalfa. And we get asked a lot of times, why don't you offer an alfalfa product? And there's some reasons behind that. But Duane, talk a little bit about alfalfa and kind of what type of plant it is and what you've seen in the past with it.
Yeah, alfalfa is a great product, Terry and Don, but they call it the queen of forages, and just like any other queen, she's kind of high maintenance. So we got to have good fertility. pH has to be within line. There's some insect issues that go along with it. There are periods where alfalfa does not like to be grazed. So when we have deer pressure or cattle pressure, whatever you're talking about, it's a negative on the plant when it has that constant grazing. Yeah. So it likes to grow and it likes to rest. But as far as drawing power, it's great. And if you've got a neighbor with alfalfa, it's tough to compete with.
Well, I know when Don and in his and Duane's area, when they're out glassing in the summertime, they're looking at bean fields. Down where I'm at, we look at alfalfa fields. The summer months, they're hammering the alfalfa.
Yeah, and and this time of year it's all freeze dried up here now, but it still has some attraction if you've got alfalfa around. So, not a bad product. It's a little like corn. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it's a little like corn. It's tough for the average food plotter to grow. If you want it to look like what the farmers have, then you need to manage it like the farmers do.
Don, you've had alfalfa on your farm when you had your cattle that you would bale for hay. What have you seen with deer and alfalfa?
Well, there's absolutely no doubt that there's nothing more attractive to deer, especially in the summertime, than alfalfa. I mean, it's just really nutrient dense. Like Duane alluded to, the issue is the maintenance that's required. It needs to be cut and baled about every 28 days. So most food plotters are not set up for that.
Yeah. What about Duane? Do you have any problems with insects with alfalfa, or is that just like anything else? Is there something that people that are interested in planting it that have the access to plant it, put enough nutrients down, and then bale it? Is there anything they need to worry about with that above any other product?
Yeah, alfalfa it's subject to the potato leafhopper, and the leafhopper survives wherever the frost line is in the south, but it finds its way back up into the Midwest on wind currents. It's a very small insect that can't fly, but it gets in the air and the wind brings it to us. So usually by mid-May, 1st of June for sure, we've got leafhoppers in our area. So when you put alfalfa in a food plot, you're going to have to spray it, or that leafhopper will defoliate it and basically put the plant under such stress that sometimes it won't survive. That's another reason I don't like to see it in blends, because if it's the weak spot in the blend, like such as a clover blend or whatever else you want to mix with it, because it's susceptible to those leafhoppers. And
interesting.
So, and a farmer would harvest his alfalfa 10 days later, spray for leafhoppers, and then another 15 to 18 days later, harvest again and start the cycle start the whole cycle over again. That's a pretty hard commitment for a food plotter to be able to take care of alfalfa that way.
Right. I know I hunt a lot over alfalfa, and right or wrong, my strategy is using the alfalfa. We're actually creating an income source for my wife's grandmother who's still alive. So we're selling that alfalfa to a local farmer, but obviously the deer are getting benefit from it too. And, one of the questions we're going to talk about a little bit later is browse pressure on soybeans. When you have something like alfalfa in an open field, it really helps take that browse pressure off of your food plot if it's there, but people just have to understand the maintenance associated with it. But if you can maintenance it, if you can bale it, if you can keep the bugs out of it and put enough inputs down to have it successful, it is a plot that can come back for a few years. Don, how long can you really let alfalfa go in the same spot?
Well, if you can get 5 years out of it, you're doing fantastic.
Okay.
4 to 5 years, I think, is pretty typical for an alfalfa planting, but then you can't come back with alfalfa. You got to rotate something else in.
Right. So, like I said, I hope that's helpful information. We're going to keep this moving a little bit, and I'm sure it'll spear more questions that'll come in, but we're going to keep the conversation going. One of the next products that we get asked a lot about is chicory. We put a very small percentage of chicory in our clover. So talk a little bit about what type of a plant chicory is, Duane.
So if you're not familiar with chicory, it would resemble kind of a dandelion type leaf. It's a nice add-on to the chicory. It has a lot of, or to the clover blends that we use. It offers a lot of calcium, above average calcium, a little more than what clover does. So it's a nice add-on, and it has some, in some animals, it has some parasitic qualities to help with parasites that they may have. So chicory is just a nice add-on. It's a behind-the-scenes guy. He's never out there, out front making a big name for himself. He's just in the background getting the job done.
So it's not something that we would just necessarily want to plant a whole field full of just chicory by itself. It's more of a secondary, third, or fourth product that you would put in with something to be a complementary then.
That's how I see it. There was a period where in one of Don's blends that we had 5% chicory in it for the first year or two, and the feedback from our customer base is it's just too much.
Yeah.
They wanted more. It was a clover mix. They wanted more clover and less chicory, and that's where we got to the 3% we're at today.
Now, Don, I think you told me once that what you had seen or heard or experienced with chicory is in the heat of the summer when it's dry, it tends to be a little bit more sustaining or hardy. Is that true, or did I get that wrong?
No, you're right. It's a little more drought tolerant than the clover. That they make a good companion crop for a couple of reasons. The clover is a legume that puts nitrogen in the soil, which the chicory then utilizes. But the chicory is a lot deeper rooted. So in the summer, a lot of times when your clover dries up and goes dormant, that chicory will still be growing and green.
Gotcha. So when clover's maybe struggling a little bit to keep up in dry months, we can get a little bit of browse pressure taken off with the chicory. What type of you said that clover was a legume, alfalfa is a legume. I think some of the same herbicides are used for both alfalfa and clover. One of the questions we get a lot is if a blend has chicory in it with legumes, does the certain herbicides, will it kill off the chicory?
I don't think it will, Terry. Don, I'm going to defer this to you because I know that the manager that you are, that you've been over your clover plots.
Well, to be honest, the best maintenance for clover is to mow them about every 30 days. That's how I maintain mine. I rarely spray anything on them, and when I do, it's usually select or something for the grasses.
Right.
I'm not too worried about the broadleaves because that continual mowing will take care of the broadleaves in most cases.
See, Don and I have done this enough. I just tee up stuff for him because I know what his answer is going to be. I wanted that to be the segue into clover, and clover is probably one of the most misrepresented and misunderstood products, in my opinion, in the industry, just because of how much people don't understand about. They just think red clover, white clover, ladino clover. They don't know how many varieties are inside of each of those different types of clover. So, I mean, Duane, put in perspective how many, I mean, I don't even know if it's possible to put a number on it, but there's a lot of different clovers out there, right?
Yeah, we've got red, we've got medium red clover, which is a biannual, maybe 2 years at best, all you're going to get out of it. There are 3-year reds that come into the industry. There's the Ladino white and all the different brands. And then there's just the common white Dutch that doesn't get very tall. And then and yellow blossom sweet clover, which makes you think that it ought to be great. And it's just nothing but a soil builder.
Right.
Has very little feed value. So yeah, you got to kind of know what you're talking about when we put clovers together, or you go to buy clovers.
So, Don, with all the tissue analysis that we've done over the years, we've found that different clovers kind of peak in feed value or soluble protein or other nutrients that attract deer at different times. Your strategy was always to put a blend of specific varieties that were accomplished by or profiled by a tissue analysis, so that there was always something palatable when it came to clover through the year.
Right. Yeah, we wanted, and essentially we use not only the tissue samples, but utilization cages in the plots. When we seen deer hammering one over the others, well, we took a close look at it. Sent in the tissue samples, and that's the one that was going to make the cut most of the time.
Right. For me, one of the things that I like about the clover, even though we raise a lot of alfalfa on my place, but that's more for an income reason, the thing that I do like about the clover is I don't have to bale the clover. I can mow that thing with a zero-turn mower, a bush hog, and when I mow over it, I don't have to worry about getting it off the top. So clover for some people is a great option, especially when it's a reoccurring. If you maintenance it right, frost seed the void areas, it can come back year after year, right, Duane?
Yeah, that's right. As long as we're using good perennial clovers, that's the case. There are some clovers out there that aren't considered long-term perennials. They're short-term biannuals or perennials. So you got to make sure you know what we're talking about. Where I referenced alfalfa as being the queen of forages, clovers are just a little bit more tough. They've got a little better work ethic, so they can do exactly what you said, Terry. We can look up frosting, but we can put them out early. We don't have to stew and fret over them all summer. They pretty much take care of themselves. And then weed control. Don mentioned mowing. I think that we've had that conversation in the past, and I think that's as good a program as any. So just a good product, a good work ethic, but you got to make sure you got the right ones in place.
Well, I'm going to make a statement here that's an observation from my farm, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong or elaborate if I'm right, and I don't care which one of you start. I'd like to hear from both of you. But when I'm setting in an elevated blind in November and we haven't had a frost yet here in Kentucky, say it's end of October or early November, I can see a lot of deer in the alfalfa. Once the first heavy frost hits and it gets cold weather, I don't see as many deer in the alfalfa, but as long as they can get to it, they're eating that clover year-round, even when the temps are down. Is that a trait of the blend specifically to what I'm planting, which is real world, or is that just the nature of the clover itself that it might be a little bit more palatable even in cold weather?
Well, I think it's some of both. That's the beauty of clover over alfalfa is that, like, for example, today I pulled home right before dark into my drive, and I've got a cattle pasture that's got some clover in it. And there was deer out there feeding in it, and it's about, 5 or 10 degrees. I've seen more than once where deer were pawing through snow to get at that green clover underneath. So I think the palatability stays with clover into the winter months a whole lot better than with alfalfa.
Yeah, I agree completely. When we get to this time of year, we look at it as a dry product, much like you would a bale of hay instead of a green product we do all summer long. But the protein source stays there in a dry product just like it would in a dry bale of hay. It doesn't disappear.
Sure.
What I see is, and I picked up some cards out of some cameras here a week ago, and my plots are just nothing but a mud hole right now, and they have grazed them down to the point that there's nothing left. They found it early in the spring for very obvious reasons, and then they've stayed there all year, and they basically teed me up for a frost seeding opportunity with being able to get the seed to the ground very easily at this point.
Well, I don't know if I'll ever put a plan together from this point forward where I don't have at least some clover around the perimeter or part of my diversity program in my food plot, because especially where I'm at, and I get up in like Minnesota or something, it might be different way up north, but I still have just a ton of warm weather after we've got that first initial freeze, and the drawing power of clover just seems to be crazy. I realize that guys that are looking for income, or that they have cattle and they have the equipment and means to deal with alfalfa, there might be some advantages there. But the other thing I like about clover is I get that diversity, I get that green for when deer prefer green over grain. But I think the other thing is, browse pressure wise, and maybe this is more specific to the real world, I can put out these little small strips or small plots. Micro plots are a huge deal with some food plotters because they just maybe have an inside corner that the farmer gives them, or they don't have a lot of equipment. I think clover is probably one of the best choices for small plots if that's all a land manager can do, right, Don?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you're almost never going to get away with grain, whether it be soybeans or corn, in a small plot. So that leaves you with greens, and you basically, your choices are clover or maybe a fall planted blend such as Deadly Dozen.
All right. So one more question before we leave clover, and it's a question we get a lot. Logging roads and open woods, people try to plant stuff, and my first response to them is you have to think about the roots under the ground as competition just as much as the canopy above. So Duane, when we're talking about clover, you can, if you had that on a logging road, there's nothing wrong with driving over the top of it. It's not like a Nebraska where you snap the head and crush the bulb, right?
Yeah, that's right. It'll tolerate wheel traffic and pretty well. Your comment, and I've never heard anybody say it better, Terry, is we talk about the canopy, but we don't talk about what's below grade, and that's probably as much of a detriment to establishing any kind of vegetation as that there is. And if there's nothing currently growing there, you're probably not going to have much luck introducing something else. Clovers are deep rooted, and if there's enough adequate rain, you're going to have periods that they do well.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of gimmicks out there on the market that maybe be like just a straight ryegrass or something, this throw and grow stuff that convinces people to go in and, shake these bags on the forest floor, and you're providing a big solution for your whitetail herd, whether it's the nutrition or the hunting side. But planting in underneath of canopy is tough no matter what product it is, isn't it, Don?
Yeah, for sure. And, that's the reason we've never got into the throw and grow and those types of products, is because they just simply are very poor excuses for a food plot, if you will.
Right.
It just doesn't hardly work.
All right. Well, I hope that. Go ahead,
Gary. The only thing that I could talk about that environment is maybe oats. They start easy, and in the fall of the year, if you can get them out and get them started before, so they're there when the canopy comes off, you've got some quick green up. But it's not a long-term food plot.
Yeah, I agree that if somebody just wants to do something inside of close canopy or low sunlight, I don't think a spring plot is the right solution. You might be able to get by with a oats or something like that. I mean, good grief, oats will grow in. I think I had oats germinate in the floorboard of my truck one time. That's an indication of how much dirt was in there, but at least the canopy is gone and you're through drought season. That tree root system is probably going to override and suck up everything that plant would need. And to get something through middle of summer underneath a canopy, it's going to be tough. So invest your money where the best solution would be. As we move to our next C, this is going to take a little bit because it's corn, and a lot of people grow corn in their garden. There's a lot of row crop farmers, and we actually came out with a specific corn that Don's been working on for a lot of years. Duane, a big portion of your business and your livelihood has been around selling corn. For a food plotter, what is the deal with corn, and what do they have to know before they just decide I'm upgrading my corn patch to a acre field of corn?
Yeah, so most people go into a food plot, a corn food plot, with the idea they want it to look like what they see along the roadside, and that's tough. We're usually not on the best part of the field with food plots, and it's just a high management crop. It takes nitrogen. Corn at the 3 or 4 leaf stage, and weed pressure will be a failure. It's not going to. That corn plant knows that it cannot produce a nice, great big blocky ear if it's got all that competition. So, there's a lot of management involved. I think we started looking at analysis on corn. I'm looking at a book here tonight in 2013. I think your friend Patrick Simpson said it's some corn, and the analysis on it was great. And I think it was a mycogen number, and we've tried to access it, and it's no longer available. And then over the years, Don and the different people through real world, some of your pro staff people tried some stuff, and it's just average, just been average. And I'll be the first to admit that I didn't really push these guys into a corn program. If anything, I may have held them back a little bit. This new product that Don's and Kitchen Seed are working on has numbers that are far above what we've looked at in the past. It'll still be as complicated to grow, but with a little effort, I think we've introduced a new product with a tremendous amount of drawing power.
All right, so let's start. I want to spend a little bit of time on corn because I think that there's a lot of people that want to dive into it. They might have been successful growing corn in their garden, and they're like, okay, I'm going to go put an acre out. From a planting stage, obviously we can buy the corn seed, whatever corn it is, whether it's Real World's Nutri-Crave corn or field corn. Let's talk a little bit about identifying corn and how we plant it. Because I've started to see some corn in some blends that we know is not being planted by a planter. How does that work when somebody tries to broadcast corn?
The corn plant has the ability to determine how the ear size is semi-determinate or flex type ear on it. So if the neighbor if it shows that its neighbor isn't real close, the corn plant has the ability to say, hey, I've got some ability here. I'm going to put on this great big showy ear. But if you broadcast it and you get them all close together, you get a lot of these little nubbin ears. Everybody wants that ear that looks like, that's along the edge of the road. But if the corn needs to be planted in rows, ideally planted in rows, and it needs to be spaced evenly so each plant has the equal amount of sunlight and water and nutrition. So that's an ideal world.
Right.
So when we put it in blends, we create competition, and that plant struggles to know whether or not I like to say, if you put it in with soybeans, just for example, he doesn't know that soybeans are friendly. Is supposed to be there, and he's going to help out the process. He just looks at it as competition.
Right.
So there's a lot more thought that has to go into planting corn than there is to broadcasting beans and other products out there.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the size of the corn. I know that we're labeling in the pilot program. We're labeling our corn. We've had it sorted to medium flat, medium round. But if someone's using an older generation planter, I think some of the new technology, it doesn't matter as much, but you got to kind of have plates to match up with the corn that you're going to get that year. And you really don't know what the corn kernel size is until the harvest and the packaging, right?
That's right. So all the corn's been graded, and you're right, Terry. We're going to have medium rounds, medium flats, large rounds, and large flats. When you get the corn in, it's going to be next to impossible for us in this market right now to fit the exact kernel size that you need for your exact planter. So you're going to have to look at the kernel size that you get, and you're going to have to see how it matches into your planter plate. So you're not planting doubles or you're not getting skips.
Right. You see, a row crop farmer is going to be prepared for that no matter what it ends up being that year. But, I think food plotters sometimes might take that a little bit for granted. The next question I have is about maturity. So many of our listeners understand how a group number of a soybean is based on the geography and the length of growing season. Corn is measured a little bit differently by days of maturity. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Sure. So the corn is based, it has a relative maturity in numbers of days, whether it be 108, 115, 17, or whatever it is. So, and that's all based on growing degree units. So it won't be the same every year. If you have a real hot, bright, sunny summer, corn matures faster, and you can relate that back to sometimes they're picking corn on Labor Day and sometimes they're not. So that's kind of a comparison. But maturity in corn is based on black layer, which is 35% moisture in the grain, which is way beyond any food plotter needs to know.
Right.
But that's how corn is ranked in maturity. So, for example, the corn that Real World's bringing out, the NutriCrave corn, is about 109-day maturity. That doesn't mean that it's not going to work south, or it's going to be way too full season up north. It just means that that's where the maturity range is, and the fact that we're not putting it in a truck and taking it to the elevator and evaluating it on dollars per acre, it's not as important as it is to the farmer.
Right. Farmers are tweaking this thing to they're trying to get bushels per acre. We're trying to get nutrition in that ear that gets into that deer's diet. And Don, to close out and wrap up on corn, is the best thing for a food plotter that wants to try corn his first year, is the best thing to do for them to go talk to a local row crop farmer that grows corn, or what's your best advice for somebody that's wanting to do their first NutriCrave corn plot this year?
Well, first of all, the first thing I would consider is, do you have the equipment to get it done correctly? Do you have a planter that's going to put that seed at the right spacing? Like Duane said, broadcasting is just not going to work with corn. It needs, pretty precise spacing. So if you don't have a planter, that's one big drawback. The other thing is you need a good chemical program. and you need the ability to spray it. When your corn gets up 2 feet tall and it's time to spray, an ATV driving through, it's not going to cut it.
Right.
You're going to need some kind of sprayer on a tractor with a boom. If you don't have at least a decent planter to get it planted and a sprayer, I would suggest you not consider corn.
Yep. So it's not something for everybody, but those people who can, I think this new corn that we're coming out with is going to be a game changer. So let's move on. This next topic is a product that is probably going to end up getting some buzz from a marketing standpoint, but I don't know how much people are really going to even know about this, and I'm going to probably say it wrong. Duane's had to correct me on my Kentucky pronunciation on this a couple times. Sainfoin, did I say it right?
Gary, that's pretty close. That's as good as what a guy from Illinois can do.
Okay, so I don't feel too bad now. What is this plant? Because I know we're going to start hearing more about it here soon, and there's already some stuff out on the market with this stuff. So talk to us a little bit about this plant.
So Sainfoin is kind of it would be an alfalfa replacement, and the agronomist that I work with, his comment is, if you live in an area that would grow alfalfa, why would you want to grow Sainfoin? He said it's in relationship to alfalfa, it's an inferior product. But when we move up into the Dakotas and we get into some of those areas where, remember I talked about alfalfa being the queen of forages, and she doesn't like those hard to live in places, Sainfoin will do some of that as well. But I don't think Sainfoin is a replacement for the Clover program. So I think it's it falls through the gaps, I think, as really being really attractive and valuable, because I think there's products on both sides of it that do a better job.
Mm. Yeah,
if I could throw something in here, Terry, on the Sainfoin, I've actually tested it twice on my farm. Duane's been able to secure some seed for me in years past, and it's just not a good crop for this region. It doesn't survive. I tried it once by itself, once in a blend. I think the current trend towards using some Sainfoin in blends is more of a marketing gimmick. Here's something that nobody else has. Well, there's a reason that Real World doesn't have it. It just hasn't proven itself in our plots.
Yeah, the whole thing is people don't understand the amount of product that you test, because it basically gets the hype that it's the next best thing, and okay, we'll test it, and if it meets the mark, then it goes through the program, similar to NutriCrave corn. This many years of getting there. But based on my limited knowledge of this product, I think there might be some potential. Is it a kind of a secondary? So tell me if I'm wrong, Duane. In certain aspects, with really cold temperatures, it might be a secondary solution. But for the majority of this listening base, there's a better choice on either side of the portfolio of products that we have access to, right?
I'd agree with that. Maybe it makes its claim to fame as a ground cover. I don't think palatability and I think we can do better than that in a lot of cases, and sometimes I think it's a throw in with some other products just to try to spin it and be a little bit different. So,
all right. So we're going to move now to soybeans, which is pretty much the flagship product of Real World. I don't know that we have to go crazy in depth with it, but our MO with soybeans is you provide a blend of different beans that will transition in maturity through the fall, but have really high oil. I guess in my opinion, to comment on Duane, soybeans out of anything that's ag type product that we can bring to food plotters is probably the easiest and user friendly of anything they can put out.
I'd agree with that. I think that as far as anything that's row crop type product, small grain type product like that, I think that soybeans are very forgiving. The industry has, over the last 20 some years, has brought us herbicide tolerant soybeans. There are, and through some testing, we found that there are some that have higher oil and fat, protein content than others. I think that's an attraction with maximum nutrition. I like to think of it that way. I think that I listened to Don and his buddy Todd Ewing talk about their past history with soybeans and how well that they've worked, and I've experienced it. I think that overall, if you've got enough room to justify a soybean plot, I don't think you can do any better. The thing I like about it is there's an add-on in the fall that you can go in and do a double crop process with some other products that gives you the grains and the greens. And if you've got a season like we had this last year, where we didn't have a lot of cold and the proteins weren't terribly important, the greens are doing the job in the same location.
Well, Don, we talk about the advantages of soybeans a lot. I want you to comment on one of the disadvantages of soybeans, and that it is a really tough product to put low acreage out because withstanding browse pressure due to the attraction at germination creates a little bit of a problem for guys with small areas.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a soybean plant's attractive to the deer from the time it germinates clear through the growing season until that last grain's consumed in the winter. But it's so attractive that in a small plot, if you've got much of a deer herd, it'll just wipe them out.
Yeah. We get a lot of questions on how many acres do I have to plant, or why don't you sell it in a half-acre bag? Well, there's a reason for it. I don't know of a way outside of a fence that you could even have a chance at less than an acre. But one thing that I want Don to comment on is, in the opening of this podcast, I think there's a quote you said, the best part about a spring food plot is you have a second chance if it fails. The only way you know for sure if it can withstand the browse is plant it with utilization cages. And even if it does get mowed, you're still doing, everybody considers that a failure, but you're still actually doing a good thing by attracting deer and providing nutrients there in that plot, even though you might have to go back in and put in a fall plot. So, yeah, it does kind of stink a little bit that you don't have 48-inch tall beans sitting there in August. But I think the process that you have to go through and the opportunities you're providing your herd, it's not necessarily a failure, right?
No, not at all. And in fact, it imprints on those deer that this plot is the place to get highly nutritious food, palatable food. So you want those deer coming there, before you plant or before hunting season, and to continue to recognize that plot as the place to go when they're looking for a high quality food source.
Yeah. So the answer to everybody's question on how many acres do I have, the answer that I think probably is most accurate is it all depends, right?
For sure.
All right, let's move on to the next one, sun hemp. This one gets a little bit of PR on the outdoor platforms and everything. Duane, talk a little bit about sun hemp and what it's really used for.
So sun hemp, it's a tropical legume, and the fact that I've mentioned tropical, we all ought to recognize the fact that it grows in warm weather. So the first sign of cold weather, it's headed down. It's not going to be around. I see it gets fairly tall. I see that kind of being attractive. Maybe you can use it in a summer screen. It's not going to be around once frost hits or beyond. It's a legume, so it offers nitrogen to the soil. I see a little bit maybe like Sainfoin. Maybe it's a soil builder. I'm not sure.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to ask Don about. I don't want to steal a question from later, but this might be a potential product if a guy's wanting to put a fall plot in and he just doesn't want that dirt land there, that sun hemp could be used in the summer to get him by till his fall program. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a good plant for putting organic matter into the soil because it's a big plant, big, tall, good stalk on it. So you plant it in the spring, and before it's time to plant your fall plot, you go in and mow it down and let that dry down, and then disc that in, and it adds some organic matter to your soil and nitrogen as well. So it's a good way to prepare for that fall plot.
But as a food source and nutrition, full nutrition program as part of your diversity, probably not the best. It would be used more as just soil building, right?
Well, I think it does offer, a little bit of nutrition. I think there's better things, soybeans, for example. But it just depends. If you're in an area where your soil is really poor and you're trying to build up that soil, then it might be a better option. But for most of us, soybeans going to be the ticket.
Okay. Well, the last product, and I know this has taken a long time to get through, but I think it's important information that we want to get to our listeners. The last one is going to be sunflowers, and there's sunflowers that are out there just by themselves in a sunflower field, and we've actually used sunflowers in an upland game blend that is part of a diverse food plot that will attract not only deer but different types of birds. So Duane, talk a little bit about sunflowers and let's wrap up here the products so we can move on.
Sure. So I think sunflowers have a great place, and if you're interested in multiple, different things to hunt or attraction on different animals, a great upland game product. The sunflower oil is highly attractive to the deer. They recognize the oil and the fat. Protein on the leaves off a sunflower plant is going to run 22-25%. So I mean that's a pretty good number. The deer only needs 16% protein in his diet daily. We're well above that. So the sunflowers have a place, I think. I think they're highly attractive when they're young. First inch or two out of the ground, I think that it's a major draw. It's kind of like a young soybean plant. And then I think the finished product, the finished sunflower, has some real value to a lot of different game types of game.
Don, you got anything to add to sunflowers?
Well, I think it's another opportunity for a crop to grow in your plot and then come back with your fall planted blend. You get plant those sunflowers and let them mature. A lot of guys mow them down to dove hunt. You could mow down your sunflower patch and then just broadcast oats over the top of it and plot topper over the top of it, and you should get a good fall crop that way.
Right. Yeah, those dove hunters, they really like to bush hog down those sunflowers and hunt over them. I know we've shot a lot of doves over sunflower fields over the years. So, well, that took a little bit of time. I hope our listeners appreciated going through that, and you guys can give us feedback if that was helpful for you, and if you want us to do this again a little bit later in the year as we prepare for fall plot season, that we talk a little bit about each one of their plants. So before we move on to the buyfarm.com segment, let's talk about our lessons learned from a research herd. Don, can you transition us over to that segment, please?
Yeah, today's lesson is going to fit right in with what we're talking about, and it's about nutrition. One of the things I learned with those captive research deer was how important year-round nutrition was. I think a lot of deer hunters get hung up on the idea that during the antler growing season, that's when you want to put the minerals out and feed your bucks real good and this and that. But to maximize antler growth, fawn production, health of the animal, nutrition is definitely a year-round proposition. It's important for both the bucks and the does. I know we've talked about fetal programming a lot, but that year-round nutrition to your does helps with that. So don't get hung up on the idea that just during the time that the does are raising their fawns and the bucks are growing their antlers is the time to address nutrition. One of the best ways for a land manager to do that is with a well-rounded and diverse food plot program, not just putting out a plot of one crop to kill deer, but a good manager, he wants to raise the biggest and most healthy deer that he can, and year-round nutrition is definitely the ticket. And it became very obvious to me with those research deer just how important that is.
Well, I don't want to get you all fired up and get you on a soapbox tonight because I know we're running a little bit behind schedule, but there's really two different types of people that doubt what we're trying to do and what we're talking about on this podcast. You have it on both spectrums. You have the guys that say it doesn't matter. I can go to the local southern states and get the same thing, and it does the same thing. And then you have the other perspective of the row crop guys that say, you know, I can just plant whatever I got and leave a little bit. A row crop farmer, and Duane can speak to this, their main goal is usually bushels per acre, right, Duane?
Yeah, bushels per acre, dollars per acre.
Right. It's commodity grain that they're trying to get the most they can out of that acre. What we're doing is not necessarily bushels per acre. We want a large yield so that we have enough food to get us through winter, but as Don just said, it's the nutrition that we're getting. And you can't just wing it as it comes to what you get at the local co-op, what the farmer might have available that's going to provide the same nutrition at different points in time of the year. And the people that doubt what we're doing and say it doesn't matter, they're just not accepting the fact they haven't separated themselves from bushels per acre or pound per seed to getting the most nutrition into an animal as possible. So food for thought for all of those who out there who are trying to do it the right way and optimize the levels. So with that, Don, let's go to the buyAfarm.com property of the week.
BuyAfarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
All right, this week's featured property is in Jefferson County, Illinois. It's actually an online auction for 60 acres. They've broken that 60 acres down into 3 tracts. The first tract is 23 acres, mostly tillable. It's got some road frontage on North Fox Road. It is near Centralia, Illinois. Tract 2 sits right next to it. It's 17 acres. Has a home site, pond, pasture. There's electric and water nearby. It's also got road frontage on that Fox Road. And then the third tract is 20 acres, mostly tillable. I think the reason they broke this up into 3 tracts is that the home site is actually right in the middle of the property with some tillable ground on each side. You could easily bid on all 3 and get the entire 60 acres. So right now, the 40 acres that's tillable is leased for farming at $135 an acre. The operator is willing to continue farming that property if the new owner wants them to. If you're interested at all in this property, the agent to talk to is Mark Kennedy. Mark's phone number is 618-924-1747. And you can go to buyAfarm.com and you can just look for the online auction for 60 acres in Jefferson County.
Yeah, buyAfarm.com organizes their properties very nice. So for those of you who are out of state just or not sure where this property is, trying to find it, just click on the county, click Jefferson County, it'll pop right up. So great listing that give Mark Kennedy a phone call if you have any questions for these 3 different tracks. So Don, when you and I first started talking about doing this episode, we knew we were going to run a little long and would probably have to bust it up into 2. So we are going to do the fall plot products later. It's going to be a little bit longer, but we got some dynamite questions that I would like Duane to stay on the line and pretty much help us answer if he's okay with that.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, so let's kick it off there, Don.
All right, before we jump into those submitted questions, Terry, I've got a heck of a deal for Chasing Giants listeners that I should have mentioned earlier when I was talking about my consulting trip that I'd been on this past week. But
okay.
One of the guys that I'd met with owns a couple of Chevrolet truck dealerships in Missouri. It's called Victory Chevrolet in Smithville and Savannah, Missouri. And the gentleman's name I met with is Chris Yates. He was telling me about a deal that he makes for the local farmers where they come in and they buy a new Chevy truck. And each year they can trade that truck in each year for $5,000. So you buy a new truck, Next year, you take it back to Chris, $5,000, you get another new one, and you can just do that forever. My next truck is going to be a Chevy that I'm going to buy from Chris Yates, and Chris said that he'd make that deal for any Chasing Giants listener. So I told him, I said, I'm going to mention it on the next podcast, and I'm going to give out Chris's phone number. That phone number is 816-351-9957. And it doesn't matter if you're a business and you've got a fleet of trucks, Chris will take care of you. If you're at all interested in a new Chevy truck, this is a deal that you probably just can't pass up. Chris is a great guy, and I know he'll treat you right.
So Chris talked you into buying a Chevy?
I'm going to have a Chevy next time. I'm telling you what, this is a deal. You get a new truck every year for $5,000. You think about it, if you would buy a new truck and keep it for 10 years, what's it worth?
Right.
Nothing. And then you're stuck buying another truck, and who knows what's going to cost 10 years from now. Well, if you invest $5,000 a year, you're always in a new truck. And there's a stipulation on mileage. I think it's 20,000 miles or so. Chris can give you the details. But if you go over, I'm sure he'll work with you too. But
I'm sure that if Chris talked Don into buying a Chevy, it had to be a great deal. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yep. So Chasing Giants listeners, I went out and I made you a deal for a new truck. So give Chris a call.
All right.
Let's jump into the questions.
Okay.
Duane, I'll just read them, and then you can jump in and answer.
Okay.
The first one comes from Jared Barr. He's from Meadville, Pennsylvania. And Jared says, Don and Terry, thank you so much for this awesome podcast. I have learned so much from you two. My question is about food plots. My soil is very rocky, and I have had trouble getting anything to grow in it. With the proper fertilizer, would your Clover blend grow in rocky soil, or should I look into something different? Thank you again. Keep up the great podcast. God bless. So what do you think, Duane? Will our Clover blend do well in Jared's rocky soil?
Don, I think that, and Jared, I think that the foundation of any food plot, the soil sample, you got to figure out a little bit about what you got going on fertility-wise to make that plant as healthy as it can possibly be. Clover's being deep-rooted and the chicory being a deep-rooted product. I think that's as good a choice as what we've got to offer. I don't know if I was going to go beyond that into my lineup at Kitchen Seed. I don't know what else I'd offer for him. So I think that's a good choice.
Probably his toughest thing is going to be getting the groundwork so that he starts with no competition. Duane's always talked a lot about do it right the first time. It sounds like that would probably be the biggest challenge in it is getting it cleared off and ready for a seed bed then, right?
Right. No, I agree, Terry. I'm glad you brought that up. That start clean and there's shortcuts just don't pay off on a lot of these situations. So, and you're right, working up these rocky soil. I'm not sure how rocky we're talking about this. You got to have some soil there for the roots to feed off of. So, but one of the things I'm going to spend just a little bit here on this clover topic is, guys, it's frost seeding time. So, let's don't let that get away from us.
Right.
Good point. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We got 4 questions tonight, so let's keep moving and try to get through them all. The next one is from Lee DeSmith from Muhammad, Illinois. That's not far from you, Duane.
Pretty close.
Yeah, so Lee says, Don and Terry, I really enjoy your podcast and congratulations on your success. I planted Real World's Deadly Dozen this year and really liked the drawing power it provided in the late season. I shot a mature buck in that plot in December, which was a change as it used to be unusual to see a mature buck after the rut. I would like to plant Deadly Dozen again next year. What do you suggest to plant into the plot in the spring to provide food and avoid the plot from laying fallow until fall food plot planting time in August? Also, at what point should I rotate out of Deadly Dozen into something else? Thanks, Lee.
Great question.
Well, I'm going to start it, and then I'm going to let Don jump in on his opinion on this as well. I think soybeans are a great option because we can go back in and put our Deadly Dozen over the top of that. And in late August, early September, we'll get a large percent of Deadly Dozen to take off. Mother Nature will give us a little help, a little rain. So I think you can have a little bit of the grains and the greens both in that environment as well. The other thing I think that you could do is frost seed your clover in that right away, right now. And as soon as it warms up, we're going to get a nice, good green crop of clover come up. It's going to be highly attractive. The does and the fawns will be in it early and all summer long, feeding. Nutritional value is very high. You could go in and terminate that later and then put your Deadly Dozen in after that. If you felt like you needed to, there's always the option of leaving it. As far as year three seems to be the point where I think our quality changes a little bit. So it might be time at year 3 to swap out and maybe an upland game type product or something like that for a year and then go back to the same program again. But go ahead, Don. You jump in there on that.
Well, I think that was a great point with the clover, Duane, because that clover is actually going to add a little nitrogen to the soil for that fall plot. So, it would help it get going. But, there's a few options. We've talked about some of them earlier. You could go in if you wanted to build your soil with sun hemp or sunflowers. Personally, in our area, we're not looking to build soil. We've got pretty fertile soil around here. I like the soybean option myself, but the clover is also another really good one.
Well, I don't know how big Lee's talking about planting, but the soybeans, if it's in a small plot, it's not a problem if they mow them off, and you wouldn't even have to buy an expensive bean like that. You could go get leftovers of whatever, even if it was poor germ, and just pour it to it. The thing that I would do is if I was going to put clover, like the idea that Duane just said, is I'd plant that clover in there, and wherever I had the best stand of clover, I would leave it and either put like Kevin Thayer strips of Deadly Dozen in the clover or just terminate part of the clover field and give me now the 13th. Well, I guess how many varieties are in our clover?
Well, we've got 2 or 3 varieties of clover
and then the chicory. So there's like 4. So now all of a sudden, instead of 12 varieties in a diverse food plot, you got plus 3 or 4 more. So if you're going to go to the extent of planting our clover in the spring, leave some of that. Don't terminate it all, and then give you some more choices in that late season. You might even get more attraction out of it.
Yeah, you could even leave the clover for the first fall and into the second season and the second fall.
Right.
Terminate that.
Right.
And that'd be a good way to rotate out for a year.
Great question,
okay.
Lee.
We'll move on to the next one's from Rich Hiley from Randolph, Wisconsin. Rich says, Dear Don and Terry, I really enjoy the podcast and look forward to each episode's release. In episode 49, you discussed the importance of nutrition in the development of giant whitetails. In the area we hunt, supplemental feeding is not allowed. Does it make sense to add your maximizer deer mineral to our food plots spread similar to fertilizer? I've heard other wildlife experts say that mineral can be used like a fertilizer and the deer receive nutritional benefit due to the minerals being taken up by the plants they consume. If you would consider using maximizer deer mineral in this way, what would you recommend in terms of volume per acre? Congratulations on your success and appreciate your staying steadfast to your God-given purpose and openly sharing your faith. So what do you think, Duane? Is it a good idea to be spreading this mineral on your plots?
I thought about this, and I look at the analysis on our maximizer, and while we don't carry the salt that a lot of people carry in their nutritional products or attraction type products. I'm not sure that I like that much salt going down on a food plot product. I think that if we're trying to maximize nutrition out of the plant, I think we approach it with a targeted fertilizer analysis that does the job that it needs to do, and leave our mineral products to do the job they need to do. I think they're better separate than they are together.
Well, I'm going to jump up on a soapbox here for a little bit, guys. Believe it or not.
Welcome to the podcast, Duane.
I was waiting.
Love swings and mechanical broadheads are just the tip of the iceberg, folks.
What I really like about Rich's submitted question was that when he used the term wildlife experts, it had quotes around it. I think it's a terrible idea. For the cost of the mineral, if you would put that same expense into fertilizer, you would gain a whole lot more. You need to really look at who's suggesting that you do this and who they're connected with, who sponsors them. And then you'll see, you can connect the pieces and, you'll see the completed puzzle before your eyes. Terrible idea. And I'll jump back off my soapbox before I get too carried away.
Well, I think, Duane, we're going to end the show a little bit with a concern that a lot of our listeners have. But I think Duane summed it up perfect. Your soil test specific to the crops that you want to raise, put your money there and optimize the nutrition elements inside of those plants. Put your food program as diverse as possible to get as many of those elements that you can into those plants, instead of taking what some people might say is an easy way and dump mineral out on the ground. I don't even know. Would that even be legal?
I have no idea, but the same people that promote this kind of garbage are the same ones that are trying to make Sainfoin part of a blend in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's true. So, all right.
It's all marketing. So all it is, it's about marketing and trying to make you think that they've got a great idea that nobody else has, blah, blah, blah.
Tell us how you really feel.
Bad idea, Rich. We do appreciate your question, though.
I like the quotation marks around wildlife experts. That makes it even more fun.
Well, that pretty much told me that Rich was suspicious of the advice anyway.
Yep. All right, we got one more here. We're not doing too bad. Let's hear the next one.
The next one comes from Ryan Glasscock from Redbud, Illinois. Ryan says, Don and Terry, let's talk frost seeding. I currently have 13 acres of plots on my farm, 3 acres brassica, 3 acres of beans, 4 acres of deadly dozen, and 3 acres of clover. I was planning on frost seeding all 13 acres into real-world clover chicory this month, and then no-till drilling 6 acres of beans in this summer, and no-till drilling 4 to 6 acres of deadly dozen this fall. Do you think I would be wasting my time, money, frost seeding the clover? My thoughts are we won't be working up the ground since we have access to a no-till, so I'm hoping the clover would possibly make it that much better of a plot. I truly enjoy listening to your podcast every Monday on my way to work. Keep up the good work. What do you think, Duane?
Well, I guess you've got to look at what your objective is. I really like what he's got as a diversity across his food plot, his farm on his food plots. I think he's on target there. By putting clover on all these, especially the beans and where he wants to put the deadly dozen, I think the clover could offer some ground cover to help with weed control early. But it's going to germinate early. It's going to cover. It's going to get green. It's going to cover, have some mint attraction early. You can come back in and no-till your beans in it, and then do one of your herbicide programs, kill your clover off probably, most likely. So if the expense of it would only be my only concern there. for the soybean piece. As far as the deadly dozen, I think you've got great summer attraction all summer long, and then you could, if you want that deadly dozen plot there, you terminate it and then put it in and be just fine. So it's all about the expense of it for a short-term crop with soybeans, I think.
Yeah, that's the first thing that jumped out at me too. Was you sure you're going to get those deer hitting that plot early, but you're going to have to spray those soybeans, and you're going to wipe out that clover pretty quick. So for the expense, I don't think it's worth it. But with the deadly dozen, that would be a great crop to grow. We already talked about it, before you terminate it and plant that deadly dozen in late summer.
If you look at the attraction that clover is going to bring to that area, and then you put the beans in there, and it's going to be instant. They're going to hammer them right out the gate. So, I mean, your soybeans may actually struggle trying to establish because you've already created that habit of bringing those deer in there to feed every day.
That's
a great point.
So you got guys that are in the business to sell clover seed that are being honest with you and say you need to look at that a little bit closer. I think it's a great idea on the deadly dozen side. I don't know that it's a good choice on the soybean side, especially. Would there be anything else, Duane, that he could do? It's probably too. I don't know that you'd put a cereal grain down and try to frost seed it. But your only other choice to a clover product would just probably let it set idle until planting season for soybeans, wouldn't it?
I think that's, yeah. I think save your money on the clover pot most likely. Keep it clean. Start clean. Don't let that get away from you. No reason to have 6, 8, 10 inches of material out there to deal with. Just keep it clean and then plant your soybeans on time.
Yeah. I do like the clover with that deadly dozen, though. I think that's a great idea. Good question, Ryan.
Well, that's the last question we got, guys.
So all those guys are going to be getting a free T-shirt in the mail. I want to ask one more thing of Duane while he's on the phone with us, and we end this episode. Duane, one of the biggest things I get asked question is, what fertilizer do you recommend for my food plot? And this comes from two different directions. One of them is there's people out there that basically just throw an answer and say, put X amount of triple 19 down, or it's just a vague answer, so then they think everybody should provide that answer. We know that farmers will optimize their fields based on certain sections of the field based on what they put down. But we know the importance, and we talk about food plots and the small investment a soil test does. One of the challenges that I'm hearing from our listeners is a lot of these county extension offices are affiliated with a university in their state. So I know Ohio, a lot of their county extension offices go to Ohio State. Here in Kentucky, they go to University of Kentucky. I know a lot of people aren't able to get soil tests through their extension offices this year because the university isn't accepting them for COVID reasons. Is there any other options? I mean, this isn't a plug for another company, but is there any other options out there for people who need to spend $10 to $20 to get a soil sample specific to a product they want to put out this coming year? Because now's the time to be doing that.
Right, Terry. So you bring up a good point where the whole COVID situation shut down a lot of the entities out there that are government funded, such as Extension. There are some private entities out there still working with agriculture. The ag market hasn't been affected much with the quarantine and the COVID-19 issues. So that world goes on every day. I work with a company out of Shelbyville, Illinois called KSI Labs, for one, and there's others all around the country. So research your local areas, find one that's close, that's reputable, but get your soil samples and send them in. Somewhere between $7 and $10, it's the best money you'll spend on your food plot by far, and go that route. Don't go into a supplier of fertilizer and say, "Hey, what do I need?" It's that poke and hope type thing. You poke it in the ground and hope it works, and it's a crapshoot at best. So, let's use. The real world's been built around a scientific approach to the plant life that we present the animal. So let's keep it scientific, and let's put a scientific answer to the fertilizer need that we have. So KSI in Shelbyville, Illinois does a great job. So if you're in this part of the world, look them up on the web and contact them.
Yeah, we're not affiliated with them in any way. It's just a resource out there to, if you're having trouble finding it, you can probably even contact them and they would take a mail in, I'm sure. But as hard as it might be, Don, it's still the best way to assure. You can spend $10 and know, or you can spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars and it not even do anything that's beneficial because you're going in the wrong direction, right?
Yeah, and KSI Lab is not that far from me. I've used them before. And the great thing about it is if you tell them the crop that you plan to plant in that field or plot, they will come back with the recommended fertilizer that you need.
Specific to that type of plant.
Exactly.
Right.
So, I mean, it's well worth it, because then when you take that soil, the results from your soil test right to your fertilizer place, and you get exactly what you need. You're not, putting too much of this and not enough of that. They tell you exactly what you need.
Yeah, unfortunately, Real World is never going to be the cheapest product out there because of our quality and what we put in the bag. And it's a shame that people will justify spending a little bit more for our product and getting the quality they want, but they won't take $10 to $15 and do a sanity check. They just want the short way out to say, how many bags of fertilizer can I get at Tractor Supply and put down before the seed. So big investment in the seed, small insurance policy with the soil test.
Yeah, most definitely.
Well, Duane, over the years, you have become one of the most respected friends that I have, not only is your ability to understand and know what these seeds are doing, but also the man that you are. I think all of us on this phone call right now can attest that, bad situations and hard times and struggle in life, you depend on people that are the closest to you. And I just want you to know that I respect you, and you are truly one of the better men that I've gotten to know through this industry. And just think the world of you and appreciate you, buddy.
Thank you, Terry. I appreciate it. I've got a pretty small circle of friends, and they're all pretty special, and you guys are both in within that circle. So appreciate you letting me be part of your circle.
Well, I can say without a doubt that the Real World would definitely not be what it is today without Duane. And it might have started with me nervous as can be walking into his office 15 years or so ago. But, he's been there every step of the way, and he's a reason for the success and has become a great friend of mine as well. So just want you to know how much we appreciate you, Duane.
Thank you, guys.
Well, for all of our listeners who like the style of educating you on each of those products throughout the episode today, we know this episode went about 20 minutes longer than normal, but we hope that content at the beginning of the episode will help you make better decisions or spear on additional questions that we might be able to help you with. So with that, Don, why don't you take us out and thank our sponsors, and we hope everybody has a blessed week, and look forward to chatting with you next week.
All right, we want to thank our sponsors, BuyAFarm.com, 360 Hunting Blinds, Quiet Cat, Real World Wildlife Products, Vortex Optics, Lone Wolf Tree Stands, and Matthews Archery. Be sure to get a hold of my friend Chris Yates and get you a Chevy truck. Have a good week, everyone.